Hello. So let's have another tutorial today. Today we're going to do game cameras and custom render textures. So first we're going to add a camera here. Let's put it somewhere sensible. Drag you over here. And as you can see, we have our camera object. We have the component for the camera here. And in the view here, you can see the view from the camera and all this stuff over here. So next we want to add in our resources here a custom render texture. So render texture, and go back to our camera here. This is what the camera is going to render its image to. And in the camera component, we have the target texture here. We can drag that in there. Now the camera is sending its image to the target texture here. We'll want to create, let's create a 3D object to render that onto. Let's create a plane, bring it up here, and let's rotate it towards the camera. Let's open up the transform there, and let's set that to exactly 90 degrees to us. We can make it a bit smaller. That's about right. A little bit smaller. There we go. Let's lock all three of those transforms there and make that 0.1. That's a nice size. No, maybe 0.2. Yeah. Okay. And now we want to create down here a material to, let's call that video screen. And we can put that onto our game object there. And then in here, we can either put our camera custom render texture. As you can see now, it is rendering to our material is on the material, and the camera is sending its image to the material and then onto the object. However, I would prefer not to have it in the color of the object. So we'll set that, remove that by setting it to none, and render the material as black, and then set it to the emission. So the camera image is being emitted from the object. You'll still get all the nice reflections. We can make it nice and shiny, but the light of the image from the camera will be emitted. And we also probably want to rotate our camera here so the image is the right way up. There we go. Let's make that 180. There we go. And if we drag that around, now we can see the image is being rendered directly onto our plane there. So there's a few things we can now do with this. The one we're going to do now is we're going to make it into a canvas we can paint on. So for that, we want to click on our camera object and change some settings in the component. So up here we have currently the clear flag set to skybox. If we set it to don't clear, whatever goes in front of the camera, it'll layer the new image on top of the old image. With it set to skybox, every new image, it sets the whole image. It clears the old image and sets a new image as a new image. This will make more sense in a moment. And then we have the culling mask here, which is currently set to everything. And we want to set that to nothing for now, and to clear the image that's already on there. We set that to solid color, and we can just make it black or something, and set it back to don't clear. Now the camera doesn't see anything, as we're not seeing anything in this tab here, and we're not clearing the image. So now we want to create a brush to paint onto this canvas. So we create a new game same object. Let's use a sphere because that's quite nice. Bring it up here and scale it there. That's the right one. There's one. Scale it down. Let's call that brush. Back out again. And what we want to do now is we want to put that brush object on a layer which the camera will see. So up here in the object components, we've got our current layer, which is default. We want to add a new layer and just add into one of these new ones, a new one, and call it brush or something. We click on it again, we're then able to select the layer as the brush layer. And then if we go into our camera, we're set to don't clear, and now we can look at the brush layer. And as you can see, it now shows up in the camera view. And because we're set to don't clear, each new image of the brush is layered on top of the old one. So then what we want to do is, currently, if you look at this image here, we have the shadow on the brush, which is also being layered on there. So we want to, let's go back into our camera thing here, create a new material for the brush. Let's call this brush. Put that onto the brush object. And we want to select in our Unity shaders an unlit texture. Let's just use a color texture. So now the brush is just a flat color we are applying to the canvas. However, currently, if we drag the brush closer to the camera, it gets bigger in the view, and we don't want that. So currently, the camera is set to perspective. We want to change this to orthographic, which means it's just a flat square plane in the camera view. And regardless of how far away the brush is from the camera, let's change its color so it's, we can just clear the camera view again. Solid color. The camera view will be cleared automatically when you start running the world. So it's only just for demonstration here. I'm clearing it each time. However, if you notice, the orthographic view is too large for the canvas. So we've got our size of the camera's perspective here. We want to bring that down to the same size as our canvas. Our canvas is currently 0.2, and the camera scale will be a multiple of that. So I think it needs to be 0.8 to be exactly the right size. And to center the camera onto your canvas, you can parent, not the brush, the camera, the plane. We can parent the camera onto the plane by dragging it onto it, and then set our camera's position 0, 0, 0, and that will put the camera right in the middle of the plane. However, you will now see that the object isn't drawing onto the plane because the camera is only seeing what's inside this box here, and we can adjust that, the clipping planes box, with these sliders here. Let's set that to 1 for now, and then we can drag that back in, so it's about there. 0.1, yeah. No, let's just, the far should be 0 in this case. And let's bring the near close to the canvas. What you can do here is you can, we need to make the camera a little bit bigger. So we've made the our camera here, its clipping planes, we've set their depth to of this box here to just in front of the canvas, so that our brush, it's only going to draw on the canvas when it hits the clipping plane. As you can see. Now, if we want to be able to pick this up in the game, the brush, we can't simply add a VRChat pickup component, because the pickup component works on the pickup layer, which will interfere with it being on the brush layer. And so what we want to do is we want to create a new game object for the brush. Let's make brush handle. We can turn off the box. Yeah, let's leave that, that's fine. Let's scale that down to a sensible size. Bring that up here. And if we like, we can make it more brush shaped. And that game object, we can then put our pickup component. And then we can drag our brush onto our brush handle. The brush can sit on the brush layer, and the brush handle will be on our pickup layer because I've added the pickup component. We can then drag our brush object. Let's set its position to 0, 0, 0 onto the brush first, and then onto the end of the handle. There we go. And then if we hit play, we have... Oh, why did that happen? Exit play mode. I left something somewhere that I shouldn't have. Remove that. That shouldn't be there. Interesting. Okay. So the brush, all that should be in there is the material. We can take that off as well. It's just meant to be a game object with a material on the brush layer. And the brush handle, we have the normal VRChat pickup stuff. And the two are parented together. Let's hit play again. Now have the brush, and we can paint onto the canvas. So currently this texture, if I put my head inside of the sphere, it only renders one face from the outside looking in to the object. But that means when you push against the canvas, you will sometimes get these artifacts where like you're seeing just the shell of the brush. So a way of fixing that is oh, actually no, not that one. Is using a shader which renders to both sides. And yeah, actually no, let's just use particles, standard unlit. A standard unlit particle in Unity, I believe, renders to both sides of the face. We can check by just making it really big. No, it does not. Two-sided, there we go. Okay. Standard Unity particle, set it to two-sided, and now make the brush there again and hit play. Now you'll see when we draw on the canvas, we don't get any of like the shell artifacts from before. So to set the color of the canvas when we start the game, what we want to do is create Control D on your canvas, and that'll make a copy of the canvas and the camera. So we want to delete the camera that came with that, so it's just the plane. We want to put it in the clipping distance of the camera, and we want to create a new material for that. Let's call it clear. Okay, and again we want to set it to unlit and a color texture, and we can put that onto that new plane. Let's call it clear. So we've got a game object there, a copy of the plane that the camera renders its image onto in front of it, where the camera is going to see it. And we want to change its layer to brush. So the layer behind now, you see the canvas is now showing that layer because the camera sees the brush layer. Now we don't want that there all the time because our brush is just going to be cleared as immediately as soon as it's drawn. So we want to add a Udon behavior, set this to Udon graph program asset, and create a new program, open our Udon graph. Then we want to drag in our plane, and we want to set the game object to active and have that set to active. Tick the little ticky box. And then we also want, if we Control D, you can copy it. And then we want to set it to not active. However, this won't run until we have a start event start. And that's what's actually going to drive this program to run. Start will only run when you first enter the world. So this will turn our clear game object on, turn it on, and then it'll turn it off again immediately as soon as anyone joins the world. But for them locally. So it will only happen once for you when you load into a world. And we'll just let that do its thing. And now the object has appeared and disappeared, and we can now draw onto our nice white canvas. And we click on our clear object. We may as well parent that to the plane. So when you move the plane, it moves everything all together. So with this, you can then do all sorts of really clever things. Like you can take photos of if you want to turn it into a camera to take photos of someone's avatar, you just use a normal camera without changing the clipping planes or anything. And then you only update this image with a toggle. So here is a demonstration of something I have used this system for. I won't show you in this full video, that's another video. But with that data, you can then do stuff like you can displace a material by the image texture. So this is literally just there is a camera and it is looking at that plane. And when you walk across it, it sees your avatar because the camera is looking at the player layer. And with that, you can then use a shader graph to displace the material and color it and stuff. And you're able to get all these fun effects where you can like dig holes in the snow. I haven't used it for much else, but yeah, it's really useful. There's so much you could do with this, and it's so easy to set up. You can put security cameras all over the place. You can have wherever people go, they leave paint trails. Yeah,